Well, g'day everyone and welcome to my channel, DB Designs and Sewing Australia. My name's Deb and today I'm going to show you my society dress by Gertie sewing patterns. I made this in a teal velvet that I actually had 3 meters of, and because I was going to make the full length dress with the cowl on the back, which appears to look like a hood but it's actually a cowl, I was able to buy another 3 meters of the same fabric, and I got that second 3 meters of fabric for like $38, so it really didn't cost very much. And so now I'm going to take you through and I'll be inserting photos. Just move over so I can insert photos. I'll be inserting photos all the way through, and this is the dress and it weighs a ton. Now what I will have to say is it looks like all the facings pop out, and when you put it on they do come out, but when you tuck them back in they do stay in, probably because of the weight of the dress. Now I haven't hemmed the dress because I was letting it hang to see how much I would need to cut off or what length I would need to hem it at, or hadn't really decided what shoes I was going to wear with it. So it is still unhemmed on the bottom. I will just be turning up the edge and just hemming it. I'll cut it off and then turn it up and do a narrow hem on it. And the facings, they're not ideal, and there is no way to stitch this down. And when you look at the cowl on the back of the dress, when you're wearing this, they do actually stay in. So that's not a problem. It's just when you put it on. And so when you're looking at the cowl, you can actually see the back of the dress. So you really wouldn't even hand stitch it in. I have hand stitched it on the insides of the seams and everywhere else. Now I did do the front a little bit different than their video. So the instructions are really vague, to say the least. Their written instructions are vague, but they do have a video because, of course, with Gertie, to get this pattern, you actually have to join Patreon. I don't know that I will stay joined because I only joined because I really wanted to make this dress, and I'm really happy with it. It actually looks very, very glamorous. So that's the back part with the cowl. Now the other thing I did different was in the inside front, and you can see this is still pinned, and in the photos it's still pinned and you wouldn't even know. So what they have you do is in this section here, I'll just unpin it so you can see. This front section here, which is a facing, they have you, before you even sew all of this together, they have you stitch this down. So this is actually caught into there. But I did notice that some people that had made it, it sort of had a bit of a bubble there at the front. And so to get the least amount of bubble, I was going to wait until I'd hung it so I could see if it was going to stretch in that part. But it has got power mesh in that midriff section. I actually put it in the back as well. They said not to put it in the back because you wouldn't be able to get it on. So you create the midriff section separately. You stitch the power mesh to the piece before it's ever joined to anything else. So I'd stitched this front piece and I thought I'm going to put it in the back piece as well. I'm really glad I did, otherwise I think it would have been too big. And I made the size 12D, and so that's where the back and the front join at the side with the power mesh. So the power mesh part was easy. The front bit, I didn't really understand how that was going to come together. So you're creating the bodice unfortunately, to create the bodice and put the facing on, you have to put the cowl on. This then makes it very, very heavy, because you can imagine this velvet is doubled over and it's a huge piece of fabric, and it just makes it very, very heavy and cumbersome to drag around. But there is no other way of putting the facing on unless you partially attached it before you sewed the shoulders front and back together. That part was really easy. It's a center front seam, and then they have you sew the shoulders together, and before you sew the shoulders together, you sew the cowl in. So the cowl's actually sewn into the shoulders, but these shoulders are actually, they come forward a little bit like a yoke. Once I'm happy with how much this has dropped, I will actually just hand sew this piece of facing here down to here. Now in the photos I've just got it pinned and you can't even tell, so I just don't want that bubble effect. And I think some people have got the bubble effect because if you follow the instructions, before you've even sewn the top bust section to the midriff section, you've already stitched that down. I'll just carefully hand sew that down. I don't mind the hand sewing. As I said, I stitched all the facings in everywhere they can be stitched. They're stitched down. It's just unfortunately at that center back section. I did understitch this to try and get it to lie as flat as possible, and it being velvet just doesn't press very well. I would say the hood doesn't tell you, or the cowl does not tell you which section joins into the shoulders, so you're not sure if this is the correct way up to be joining it or if it should be joined the other way. Now they're not exactly the same shaped piece, so they're nearly the same but they're not quite the same. But it doesn't say, and there's not very many notches, or there's dots, but there's two dots and they're the same dots, and that one needs to be a notch and one needs to be a dot, or one needs to be a square and one needs to be a dot, so that you know which side you're supposed to be sewing it to. So when I first made it, because I'd seen how other people's was bubbling in the front here, I only made the bodice and the midriff sections, and I sewed that together, and then I gathered the shoulders and then just pinned them without the cowl on, because if it was going to make that bubble in the front, I wasn't going to continue on with it because it would just really, really annoy me. And I mean, that's sort of like the center focal part of the dress. So you really don't want that looking weird or looking, yeah, like a bubble. And I can see even in the ones Gertie made in the velvet, if you look really, really closely, the center front, I don't know, it needs to be, when I was doing it, I was trying to think of a different way of constructing it or making the pattern, but it's not that it's not drafted properly, it's actually a very awkward spot. I get what they're trying to do, how they're trying to make it come up into a V point, but some other ones that I've seen, not in velvet either, in just like a stretched jersey, some people obviously had terrible trouble with that bubble in the front that you get there, like right in between the bust, which is really the focal point of the dress. So it's really important that that be a really, really good fix. It actually comes up into quite a V. Now from the line drawings, It doesn't look like it's much of a V, but it really is, comes to a point. So you're sewing a gathered bust onto that point. So really not for the beginner or the faint-hearted. I documented it and it took me probably about 10 hours, including cutting out. So it's actually quite an easy dress and a fast dress. Now you do have godets that you insert into it. Show you one. So it has 2 godets inserted into the front and 2 into the back, and 1 on each side of the side seams. And the side seam one, the instructions were just sew it on one side and just sew the godet on one side and then just sew up the other side like it's a whole seam. Well, then you've got flappy pieces that are not in the right spot. So I actually sewed the godet on both sides of my side front and side back, and then I sewed a seam from the godet up to the top. So it was those sort of instructions, because otherwise you don't get it sitting nice and flat on the inside. I mean, this is all velvet, so I'm not finishing any of the insides of it. But if I'd done it the way they said, then one of these pieces would have been folded over like that. And I thought, well, that's not going to sit as well. So, so I didn't do it like that. The godets in center front and center back were a little bit more difficult to do. So that's how they go. So that's interfacing, because you have the pattern piece and you have a line that you slash up to a certain point. So you need that interfacing ironed on there so that you don't, so that your fabric doesn't go any further. And the sides of the godets are different. So if you had the godet pattern piece and you put it sides together, they are actually slightly different. And one side's got a notch, or one side's got a double notch and one side's got a single notch. But when it comes, and that's for the sides, but when it comes to the ones that are inserted into the center front and center back pieces, it doesn't tell you which the larger side or the smaller side gets attached to. So I just made a decision that whichever way I did it, it probably wouldn't make any difference, but made sure, because you actually cut 6 of these pieces. So 2 are for the sides and you've got the other 2 front, 2 back. I just made sure that I used the mirror imaged pieces for the front and for the back, so that I didn't have 2 pieces in the same direction, or that were bigger on the left-hand side of it in the front, and 2 that were bigger on the right-hand side in the back. So I just made sure that I used the mirrored pieces as I'd cut them out. And with the sleeves, it's quite a nice sleeve. It's very, very gathered here. And it's got a really nice cuff. They want you to stitch one edge of the cuff to the end of the sleeve and then turn the edge of the cuff under and hand sew it down like you would in a woven garment. But this is designed for a stretch garment, but I didn't. I did stitch down the first side of the cuff, and then I put the cuffs together and just overlocked it. It's actually a really nice cuff and a really nice sleeve. And although it looks smoothed out, when you put it on, it does all crinkle up. So it actually gives a really nice effect on it. So it sort of does that and crushes up. And quite a nice firm cuff too. Lots of times cuffs are too big and fall down over my hands, but Really, really nice sleeve, really nice cuff. Would I make it again? I probably would make it again. I wouldn't put the cowl on it again. It is too heavy. Like trying to get it on, lucky it's not too tight, because trying to get it on and get that cowl in the right place, because lots of long dresses or evening dresses or wedding dresses, you unzip them and you step into them, so you're actually pulling them upwards. But because you pull this over your head and then you've got that cowl and then it's stuck on the front of you and one of your arms is through it and one's not, when I put it on, I rested it on the ironing board, put the weight of the cowl on the ironing board, and then sort of crouched down and got into it there, so I knew where the cowl would be. And then after you've done that, you need to make sure that that back facing's tucked in, which does stay tucked in. So it won't be an issue when you're wearing it. It's just an issue when you're putting it on. And then you have to, and then I got the cowl, because it was sort of a bit all skewed, made sure the shoulders are in the right place, dropped the cowl forward and then flicked it over the back so that it would get the proper drape on it. So I don't know how it would go if you just had your hair done at the hairdressers, whereas my hair, even today, looks like I've had an electric shock. But anyway, yeah, so not that easy to get it, probably easier to get into if you had someone else with you. That is this dress. Really happy with it. I'm going to a party for the King's coronation, and I'm supposed to be going as a baroness, and I have no idea what a baroness would wear, and that's when I decided I would make this dress to wear. So now I just have to get a tiara. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've made this dress. As I said, a really difficult sew, or it took 10 hours, so it wasn't a really long sew either. It was just very cumbersome with fabric that weighs so much. Now I probably have scraps that would probably add up to 1/2 meter or 3/4 of a meter left, and in the end I had 6 meters. So a lot of fabric, and even though I'm hanging it now to get it to fall as long as it's going to be so I can hem it, I think I'll buy a wedding dress box and keep it in that, because if you keep it on a hanger, it is just going to, I think, continue to grow. So no idea what shoes to wear with it. When I tried it on, I think I had long boots on under it, and that's because those boots are high heel, but they're comfortable. So maybe I'll wear those with it. It has got a weird mark on it. Oh, maybe that's gone away. No, it hasn't. In the front. See that mark? And I don't even know what it is. It doesn't even feel different. It feels exactly the same, and I didn't notice it when I was making it. Now, it's not from the iron, because if it was from the iron, it would actually feel harder than there. I can see that it doesn't always show. So it'll be fine, but it's the first thing I noticed when I put it on. I thought, oh my God, what is that? And I've steamed it and brushed it, and it has made no difference. It seems to be that the fabric's got more light reflectance. When you put it down, you know, I didn't notice it before, because when you put it flat on the table, you cannot see that in it. Whereas if I had done it with the iron, you would be able to see that in it. The fabric actually feels a little bit thinner there, but you can't see anything on the wrong side of it. There's nothing on the wrong side. That you can't even feel where it is on the outside. I have burnt velvet before. Well, not burnt it, but ruined the pile on it. But it was real velvet. It was cotton backed triple royal velvet, I think it was called. And it seriously leaves an iron mark. So I know never to iron it. I just lightly steamed these seams and everything else when I was making it. But other than that, it really doesn't need a lot of pressing. Doesn't crease up. For the hours that I had bits of it draped on everything and thrown on the sewing table, really doesn't need pressing. So I'm happy with how it looks because it looks quite dramatic, which is the effect I was going for. And I'm actually finding it difficult to find where that center back of that cowl is, because that's supposed to be your lowest part of your drape, but it tends to turn inside out. Now I could probably just put a few hand stitch in the ditch, which is what I did to the front. I forgot to say that. So in the front part here, you can see that I have partially sewn that down, but wasn't prepared to sew it down into this section, which is the section that people were getting the bubbling in. But this section here, I just hand stitched in the ditch to keep that down, to stop that facing from poking out. And I actually don't even know if it needs stitching down, because quite frankly, as I said, when I have it on in the photos, it's just pinned. You cannot see the pins and you cannot tell that it is not stitched down. I just think that that's why people were getting the bubbling, because it made this area so bulky. Some of this, so because this is velvet, it's already bulky. I slashed that open to free it up so that it wouldn't bubble. I made sure my mesh was not tighter than my velvet. So you're basically just laying that mesh onto your piece. They're cut exactly the same size. There's no tension put on them at the time of sewing. The difference is that there's negative ease in that midriff section and positive ease in the bust and the skirt of it. So that's why they get you to put the mesh in it. But they said, don't put the mesh in the back because you won't be able to get it on. Well, I could easily get it on. So I'm not sure if I would size down next time. When I was making it, I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have made a D. But it does actually fit really well, and it's not really, really low cut. You don't want it too low cut. You can see from the line drawings, it's not a really low cut dress. And from the image, it's not a low cut dress. So, but nice sleeves. Actually love the sleeves. Love the cuffs. Makes me think you could make a winter top that was quite gathered in to a nice jersey cuff. It is a bit of a shaped cuff, so you can see that it's longer on the outside than it is on that cuff, because it's actually shaped. But when you've got it on, you can't really tell that that's a shaped cuff. So yes, when I do get to go to my girlfriend's party, I will put a photo on YouTube of what it looked like, the final, all dressed up. So at the moment, I'm just in the middle of making my husband a shirt for the selfless sewing. So I'll be getting on with that. And the patterns I had ordered to get printed in AO, they tried to deliver them to work, and my work finishes at 2 o'clock on Fridays, and obviously they tried to finish it at tried to deliver it at 1 minute past 2, and there wasn't anyone there, so they've taken it to the depot, which opens at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I will be able to go on the way to work if I leave home at 6:30. So I will go and pick those up tomorrow. I think I've got 4 or 5 patterns in there. One of them is the blouse I will be making for Sew Blouse for April 2023 that's run by Gabrielle and Ruan. And so one of those patterns is for that. And it's the Flounce, it's called Flounce, by Sewing Revival. Now, I've never used Sewing Revival patterns before, so I'll be very interested to see how that goes. I've never used a Gertie pattern before either. I think the pattern's well drafted, but the instructions are just not clear enough. And I know it's not a beginner's pattern, and a beginner would look at something like that and never do it because you just freak out, really. And I mean, I make wedding dresses, so as long as I made the godets in the front even, I knew it was going to be fine. And then I was thinking, do I want more fabric to drape on the outside edge or the inside edge? So I did choose the outside edge, and then I just marked my pieces myself and said that's for the back closest to the side seams rather than the center back. So I just marked my pieces myself, but you needed to make sure that you kept your pieces in pairs, because once you've sewn a godet in, you wouldn't want to be trying to take it out. And velvet, there's no unpicking. So I didn't unpick anything in this because your fabric's pretty much ruined if you try and unpick anything. So you need to be really sure. And I didn't make a toile up beforehand, but what I did do, as I said, was I only cut out the bust, the midriff, and even though you've got to sew the cowl into the shoulder seams, I just pinned the shoulder seams so that I could see, one, if I was going to like it, and two, if it was going to have that bubble effect. Now, with no facing at all, it has no bubble whatsoever. So I'm just thinking, is there a better way to face this than the way the pattern's designed? I'm really not sure. But if you're making it, it's something to be very, very aware of. And I would certainly not be sewing the bottom edge of that facing in at the very beginning like they get you to do. So I think that can be a bit of an issue. So just something to be very aware of if you're making this. Anyway, I will see you all next week when I will have finished my husband's shirt. Anyway, everyone have a really great sewing week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're making the Gertie Society dress and you want to ask me any questions, please ask them. As I said, not for the faint-hearted, because it's a lot. If you're making the long one, it's a lot of fabric to be dealing with at once. And because I had 6 meters, I originally had 3 meters, and then I thought, oh, I'm never going to get that out of 3 meters. And then I saw at Spotlight that they had it. And so I cut a piece off to see if it was exactly the same color and if it had come off the same color lot. And it was, luckily. It was even a different Spotlight store and it was exactly the same. So that was how I was able to get it out. And as I said, not much left over from 6 meters of fabric, but still pretty cheap, because when I originally bought the 3 meters, had no idea what I was going to make with it. It must have been on sale or cheap, and they had 40% off things, and sometimes the fabrics are 50% off. And I think this fabric was only ever retailing for $18 a metre or something like that anyway. So when you can get it for $12 a metre, that's pretty cheap. So yes, very, very happy with it. Godets went in quite easily. Just needs more instructions or something other than a dot. So can we have a dot and a square, or, you know, some other symbols so that you know which side things are supposed to be joined to. I do understand that in the gathering of the shoulders, it was the 2 dots, because then you gathered in between it, and then you sewed just inside those dots to attach the cowl, but you were never quite sure which side of the cowl you were supposed to be sewing in. Anyway, because you could flip it up and it's a slightly different shape the other way. So I thought, am I supposed to be doing it this way or that way? Or which way is it supposed to be? And when they did the video, they never actually said. And the sides are not identical because the pattern piece is a shaped pattern piece. It's not exactly the same piece. So anyway, very, very happy with it. Looks very glamorous. And I will see you all next week. Have a great sewing week. Bye.